You're doing great. Ben, good morning, team. Bitcoin is the hero's journey. I think you're right about that, Ben. I think you're right about that. Bomatan, good morning, Bitcoiners. What's up, B for victory? Hope you're doing great. Bitcoin graffiti. Liminal space. Very interesting, sir. I hope so. I hope so. We've got, I'm not quite, I was trying to get space lasers and liminal space mix in a little more, but we were running out of time. So I just went with a straight liminal space and space lasers. Bitcoin graffiti. Looking forward to it. He's got his coffee ready. We love it. Good morning, everyone. Happy to share this time with you all. Thanks, Jacko. I am indeed also happy to share it with you. I've come to realize that Bitcoiners are a breed unto themselves. Thomas, you are right. You are right about that. We are a breed unto ourselves, but a growing breed. We got to grow, right? We got to grow. Today's all about how we're growing. Good morning. Thanks, Devil B. Good morning to you. Vaughn Ray, morning. You're killing me, Vaughn. I sometimes I don't read these beforehand, but you are right, Vaughn. We have a sunrise. We've got a sunrise, and Bitcoin's running, everyone. Let's have a coffee. Talk about what's new. Good morning, Bitcoin brainiacs. Like it. Like it. Tommy, good morning, friends. Don't forget to stack a sat today. It is a good day to stack sats. It is indeed. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Robert. Jeremy, here early. That's some pretty white supremacist stuff going on, Jeremy. I know where you live. I know how early it is there. Careful. Going to the gulag. Morning, gang. Morning, bud. Hope you're doing well. What's up, Joe? Hope you're doing great, my man. King Mensa Musa. Morning from Florida, where our coffees, Bitcoin, and sun are always hot. I do love the coffee in Florida, King Mensa Musa. Salinas, high on Bitcoin. Lots of people high on Bitcoin right now. Lots of people high on Bitcoin. We're going to be talking about a high you can get on Bitcoin today, right? It's actually, okay, pardon me. I went around the world. Didn't know that, Jeremy, but thanks for coming anyway. You're off the hook. You're not going to the gulags. You're less of a white supremacist. But just in case you're still enjoying some privileges, I'm sure, right? You're enjoying some privileges. And for our Moscow time today, right? You got to hear the fakest news. The Canadian newspaper, the Toronto Star, is letting us all know this was shared by users, but I found it as well, right? It's pretty good. It's a privilege, not a right, to know your kid's gender identity. Did you guys know that? It's a privilege. It's not your right. It's just a privilege. And Julie Malbogat, that's her name, Malbogat. She says, it's a hard truth that some kids live with parents who are transphobic. No province should forcibly out gender non-conforming kids to these parents. No, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't out gender non-conforming parents. All right, if that's not, Canada's got some pretty weak media. We know that, right? Canada, not really all there. Maybe the dumbest people in the modern world. But Americans, it's a big country, so there are just sheer numbers of smart people. But they've got some bad media. They've got some really bad media. And Axios, that sometimes we say is actually one of their best. Axios, some people say Axios is really good. I've never quite seen it, but some people are out there saying, well, it's not as partisan, it's not as full of brainwashing as others. We're going to talk about a few news outlets in America that think they are that today. But here we go, right? Here we go. This is from Axios. This is the actual headline. How ice is turning into an exotic and luxurious commodity. Ice. Ice is appearing everywhere, from ice drinks to ice sculptures, all at once. I've never seen any of these things. Never. Why this ice trend is mostly about harmless fun. The growing prevalence of drought and water insecurity point to a future where ice will be at an ever greater premium. Ice. And if you read the article, it's a dangerous new trend, right? It's just a really dangerous trend is what they're saying. And I'll steer you all to a quote by Mark Twain, which when he was talking about all the arrogances and where people get all of their fancy ideas about themselves around the world, he said the most American thing is our love of ice. It's the number one American trait. The most purely American trait is ice. And indeed, it is one of my hobbies when I'm in Europe is to ask for extra ice in all of my drinks and see what they come up with, right? They usually put like 2 ice cubes. So the theory fits. It is an American obsession, that's for sure. Maybe this writer didn't go to America enough to know that, by the way, we've had ice for like over 100 years. And we've been eating it at scale for well over 100 years. I like ice in my drinks, right? But who knows? Maybe they're preparing us for other stuff, because it turns out CNN, right? Here's an article. Americans have never been wealthier. That's from CNN today. In case you were wondering, CNN, Americans have never been wealthier. They go into explaining how we've never been wealthier. It didn't make much sense to me, but you can watch it if you'd like. And it's related to the CNBC article. This one's pretty good. The US debt is nearly 33 trillion, but some economists say not all debt is bad. Not all of the 33 trillion was bad, guys. There's some of the 33 trillion that are kind of okay. All right. So that's what the CNBC article says. CNBC not done there, right? Not done there. And here's what does he say? Want to know how rare it is? Come to Montreal in the winter and put water on your balcony. Yeah. What are we going to do about all this ice, guys? I mean, we just we have it everywhere in the winter, right? I wonder if that's going to continue. But according to CNBC and Joe Biden, he talked yesterday about the existential threat we face in the world. And here's what he said. And CNBC going with it. Biden says global warming topping 1.5 degrees in the next 10 to 20 years is scarier than nuclear war. There you go. That's what Biden said, right? I trust Biden. He's the leader of the free world, guys. Come on. He wouldn't lie to us. He wouldn't lie. New York Times. This one's good, right? This one's good. Is school choice destroying public education? Yes, choice destroying public education. In a new book, Cara Fitzpatrick traces the rise of the movement to expand public funding for privately operated institutions. It's pretty good. Now we're going to move into our theme today. The liminal space and space lasers signal the Bitcoin era. But first, I want to add one more that belongs in Moscow time, but it's also part of our theme today. So we're getting right into liminal spaces. If you don't know what liminal space is, by the way, everyone, just to get everyone on the same page, liminal space is the space between, the time between this, the feeling you get when you're not in one place and you're not in another, but it's not exactly traveling. One of the best versions of liminal space you can see is abandoned malls. So an abandoned mall hasn't quite been repurposed, but hasn't been occupied for a while. So it's in this middle ground. And liminal spaces are easily thought of in that context, right? So almost like a time capsule, almost like between a time when it's going to be a thing and another. An empty apartment. You ever walked into an apartment just before you moved in or just when you moved out? They'll put it in all kinds of dramatic shows sometimes, right? Remember the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? That was a great show. Everyone loved it back in the old days. And Will Smith ended the show by being in the living room and it was empty. So the furniture had been moved out. Everyone had moved out. That's what a liminal space is. Now, it's very anxiety inducing, right? That's part of the problem or the observation of liminal spaces is that it's a sort of anxious state, right? It's not this, it's not that. There's things to do. It's got to change. It's got to be destroyed. It's got to be rebuilt. It's got to be fixed. It's got to be whatever. But that's where a lot of the anxiety of liminal spaces come from. So I've often argued that since the moment Bitcoin was invented, we've been living in a kind of liminal space with the nation state and with media. Because again, I'm not one of these people who actually thinks there's, 2 or 3 or 10 people running everything. There are definitely people who know way more than all of us. But I see it as misaligned incentives and really a whole bunch of people chasing dollars that have sent them down a road that is a dead end because the mall's about to close, right? The mall isn't going to be open much longer. The mall has already got all kinds of for rent spaces. Half of the mall is already closed, yet people are still going, making their newspapers, going to their banks and doing all these things. But that world is more or less over. And this headline from The Atlantic and some of the journalism that happened after and what's going on with Elon Musk right now, I think shows exactly how in the middle of this liminal space we all are right now. So here's the article. It's The Atlantic, of course, right? Steve Jobs' wife's situation. So she comes and says, what Russia got by scaring Elon Musk, right? So they're still talking about this. Oh, Elon didn't help with the satellite assault on the Crimean Russian Navy, and so he's an enemy of the state now, and they're still going with this thing, right? So the headline, what Russia got by scaring Elon Musk, the billionaire isn't the only one who's been frightened into holding back help for Ukraine. Written by a woman named Anne Applebaum. Now, remember, The Atlantic is already on the list of Glenn Greenwald's confirmed Operation Mockingbird outlets. And Mike Benz, who we mentioned yesterday, who did the really great investigation into the Rob Reiner situation. So I have only recently come across this Mike Benz guy, and he's great. He's just out there outing Mockingbird assets daily. That's what he does, right? So he comes out, and this article is written, this another hit piece, right? Could be a Moscow Time headline on Elon Musk, and he says Anne Applebaum. So he looks into these people, right? So who's the person who wrote this? Who's Anne Applebaum who wrote this? The cautionary tale about the arrogance of a billionaire who has come to play a mercurial role in U.S. foreign policy, right? But it's also a story about fear. That's her thing. That was the tweet she had with her article. So who is this Anne Applebaum? Well, Mike Benz did us all the favor. Anne Applebaum is on the board of directors for the most notorious CIA cutout in all of the U.S. history, and that is the National Endowment for Democracy, where you'll find such luminaries as Victoria Nuland and all these other bloodsuckers. So he goes on. So, when reading her froth-mouthed hit piece today on Elon Musk, maybe take that into consideration, right? And it's not just there. He's got, more hit pieces yesterday. So the New York Times, of course, coming out, Elon Musk has crossed a line. And this is the ADL stuff, right? So they go into this whole thing about him with ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt again. Now, I don't think people realize what a big deal this ADL thing is, right? ADL isn't just one of the fake news information laundering outlets. It is at the center of all of this. And the smear of being an anti-Semite has been so powerful for so long that everyone runs away from it, right? So they've been effective in this. And now they're weirdly... so they go after Musk for what he did, right? So that he went too far. But they also made these really weird allusions to Greenblatt and the ADL and them talking about Henry Ford. So do you know the history of Henry Ford, by the way? Henry Ford, a simpleton, right? He was very similar in his time to Elon Musk in the sense that the U.S. powers that be, when America was changing greatly at that time, 100 years ago, the American system was very anti Henry Ford. So if you didn't know this, there's an actual case where he was called by a newspaper what was it again? An ignoramus. And so he sued for libel, and they had to prove that he was an ignoramus. And they did. The judge actually hit the gavel in the end and said, I'm sorry, Henry, you're an ignoramus. Because he couldn't name any. He was so uneducated, right? He didn't know anything except how to build the best car ever. And of course, he also refused consumer culture, right? He refused the Edward Bernays take. He was an enemy of Edward Bernays. So let's go back right away to even where consumerism comes from in America. Consumerism really begins when the Federal Reserve begins and the Social Security system begins and the IRS begins and all of that stuff. It happens just after the 1912, 1913 time as we enter into a crazy stock market time. So did you know that Edward Bernays, the person who invented the concept of public relations, invented modern marketing, invented modern psychological manipulation. Of course, we've talked about him many times here. He is Sigmund Freud's nephew. He's the one who understood how to make women into smokers. He's the one who got breakfast to be a big deal in America. He's the one who got Americans especially car companies, because he worked for General Motors. He's the one who invented the new model of car every year, right? Because he was all about style changing. And he was the one who also realized cars could be sold to men for masculine reasons, right? So they would have sort of a sex appeal, and convertibles start becoming a big deal. Even the idea of a 2-car household, that you would buy a female car for your wife, right? That was all invented by him. No one in America ever thought about having 2 cars before that. There was no need. So he was the first person to show that a long body or convertible sports car would appeal to men. You could actually have men want another car just to show they're wealthy by parking and having their wife drive it. So this was a whole thing. He, with the breakfast thing, right, convinced Americans. He invented for the breakfast propaganda operation. He invented the 7 out of 10 doctors and all that stuff. So what he did was he just polled a bunch of doctors and asked them, do you think that a big heavy breakfast is good or whatever? And a bunch of them just said, yeah, sure. Right. So he got something like 80 or 90% of doctors polled. They just were polled, right? Do you think a big breakfast could be healthy or whatever? And he extrapolated from that what you all and everyone has heard in their life as common wisdom, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That was an Edward Bernays psyop. It's not true. It's completely not true. He invented it, right? So Edward Bernays and the installation of this consumer culture was opposed by Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, no. We build the best car possible. We lower prices. Henry Ford was already thinking and operating on a Bitcoin standard. On a Bitcoin standard, Henry Ford, who intellectually was asking for Bitcoin already in his time, believing that if you commodified energy into a currency, you would actually have the global currency at the time. So, and a lot of people mention that Henry Ford was way ahead of this and was keyed into this very, very well. Now, Henry Ford didn't want cars to be obsolete. Planned obsolescence is something that was already debated openly in his time, and he was against it. Edward Bernays is the one who brought planned obsolescence into the automobile industry, and that's where it ended up affecting everything else that we understand to this day, right? Consumer technology and all of those things comes from that time. Edward Bernays is also responsible for the 1920s all in on stock speculation and the Wall Street roaring 20s boom. That was also Edward Bernays. He said every American has a right and a duty to own a piece of the American economy. They can do it for the first time ever. They should be leveraged. They should be borrowing. They should be investing. They should be buying U.S. stocks. And so another part of what Edward Bernays did. So I bring up all of that just to give you context that before Musk, at a time of great change, Henry Ford was attacked and targeted in much the same way. They attacked him for the Dearborn newspaper that he created, which some people said was anti-Semitic, right? So I didn't read every edition of the Dearborn whatever. I know that Henry Ford he had opinions about what was going on with mainstream media in Hollywood that would make a lot of people blush today, right? I don't know the details of all of it, so I'm not going to defend him on all of that because I don't know, right? I bet you he was wrong about a bunch of stuff. He really was not didn't know a lot of stuff. He knew cars, he knew big picture economics. He did not know details like he couldn't, in the ignoramus trial, they made a joking question, when was the War of 1812? And he couldn't figure it out. He didn't know when the U.S. Revolutionary War was. He thought that was the Civil War, which was not long before he was born. Like, he was just lost in space and time because he had been, his whole goal was to make cars for the farmers he grew up with, right? And that's all he thought about. So he wasn't really, he wasn't an Elon Musk public intellectual, that's for sure. So here's what they're talking about. They bring up this Henry Ford thing, the Henry Ford of our time, right? Because he meant that in a good way at one point, Jonathan Greenblatt. So that's why the New York Times is giving him shit here. They're saying you compared him to Henry Ford in a good way. You should have been indicting Henry Ford, right? So Ashley St. Clair breaks it down. She says, this recent New York Times article, Elon Musk has crossed the line, unintentionally makes the case for Musk's position on the ADL, and here's why. The New York Times paints Musk as attacking the ADL for no reason. They state that the ADL's CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, had previously praised Musk in October 2022 by stating Musk is the Henry Ford of our time. They conveniently omit that just a month later, Greenblatt called for advertiser boycott of X because Musk's reinstatement of Donald Trump, but I digress. The New York Times then starts ripping on Jonathan Greenblatt for a tone-deaf praise of Henry Ford because Henry Ford was anti-Semitic. This is precisely the battle between Musk and the ADL. The boundaries of acceptable, non-offensive speech are so impossible to keep up with that even the ADL can't keep up and is being scolded by the New York Times. The difference is that the ADL is demanding that Musk and X censor individuals and adhere to speech standards that the censors themselves cannot adhere to and whose boundaries are continuously shifting. This is the real issue with censoring hate speech in general. Hate speech does not exist and is totally subjective. What is hate speech to you and me maybe not hate speech to you. Entertaining the idea of banning hate speech allows whoever is in power to take away one of the core principles of a free society based on a completely subjective boundaries. Now, they go on, right? The article obviously makes this point and has, sort of its problem with it. Wall Street Silver adds, the New York Times is going after Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL for making nice comments about Henry Ford. The left is eating their own in their quest to control speech and define who gets censored and who gets free speech. It's all hilarious to watch. It is ironic that the New York Times is effectively proving for all of us that it is impossible to keep up with their woke rules. So what's amazing about this is it's exactly that. We are in this liminal space now, and they don't even know which way is coming and going, which is typical of these liminal spaces, because you can see it go further, right? You can see it's not just the what's happening with Elon Musk. Just look at the president himself, right? Just look at the leader of the free world, right? He was over there in Vietnam yesterday, right, doing the thing with the G20. He gave the most unintelligible speech you've ever heard. Like you gotta listen because it's hilarious how bad it is. And they have to push out this lady to make excuses for him. And here's what she says, right? So first of all, she's clearly intellectually feeble, right? Her name is Mona Charin. She's a columnist, so she's a journalist, right? For the Bulwark, right? And she hosts a podcast, the Beg to Differ podcast. And here's what she wrote. She actually said this in person. She said this out loud, right? Stop hiding Biden was the headline. He did fine at the Hanoi press conference. Americans need to see that he is not senile. In the article, she actually says, everything he did was great, right? He had no problems. He was speaking coherently and all that. Meanwhile, it is actually a joke. Like, people are laughing, even if they don't have anything against him, even if they're not primed to dislike Joe Biden. She talks about how he's, a good guy and at least he's not a criminal. She did the whole, at least he's not a criminal thing, right? At least he's not a criminal. That one came up again. That's kind of what they have to go with. I'm going to talk about a few other attempts to prop Biden up here in the news, but you can see that the capacity for these people to even paint this picture. Oh yeah, it's like the liminal space thing. Yeah, the mall's going to reopen real soon. Don't worry. The mall is going to be just as great as it ever was. I know half of the mall is closed, but new tenants are coming. They're going to move. This mall is going to be like it was, right? That's actually what they're trying to sell here. And if you look at this other article, Semaphore, right? Here's another one. So Semaphore now attacking Elon Musk by saying that Twitter is throttling the New York Times. So they came up with some research. They showed that no one is sharing the New York Times articles anymore. No one's sharing the Washington Post articles anymore. So here's what they say in the Semaphore thing. Right now, remember, Semaphore got a bunch of money from SBF, right? They're great guys. It's just great, right? Every one of these guys are great. So since late July, engagement on posts linking to the New York Times has dropped dramatically. The drop is not reflected in links to similar news organizations, including CNN is not reflected. Oh, I thought they said it did. The graph they showed says it all agrees, right? Earlier this week, Obama shared multiple Times articles which reached fewer than 900,000 and 800,000 users respectively. The number was far lower than any other post shared by the former president since X began sharing the data publicly. So there's that, and then here's another attack that's getting mounted against him. And this time it's Elizabeth Warren, right? So Elizabeth Warren is demanding the Pentagon now. It's the Pentagon has to investigate Elon. So they've got the SpaceX thing that they're using because he didn't hire enough immigrants. So that one's going on. Then they've got the glass house, the actual glass house. They're complaining that he wants a glass house, right? That's I think, is that SpaceX or Tesla? That's a Tesla legal case against him. So it's becoming obvious that he's getting hunted by Democrats. That's Elizabeth Warren. You've now got actual executive branch action against him, right? So Glenn Greenwald broke down exactly why this is happening. I think we all know, right? Elon Musk is under fire again. He did this last night on his show, System Update. This time from neocons and corporate journalists insisting that his refusal to turn on Starlink satellites to enable an escalation of Ukraine's military actions amounts to a form of treason. From where does this obligation come? Do we care that the attack may have caused a major escalation of the war? It's never been easier to be a Russian propagandist or Kremlin agent now. Just don't expect a paycheck. All it takes is voicing any view oppositional to the prevailing media view on our involvement in Ukraine. The reason why Elon Musk is being targeted by the ADL as an anti-Semite and now being depicted as a traitor to the country, the United States, is not because necessarily they're angry about what he did in Ukraine, although they are, but more because it's punishment for his refusal to censor on demand. The media continues its relentless attacks on Elon Musk because he poses an existential threat to what they hold most dear, their ability to silence any opposition. Musk's only crime was not following Ukraine's orders, a country he doesn't even count among his 3 citizenships. Glenn Greenwald says, the pretense here is that you have no right to resist the Ukrainian military's demands. If you're a citizen of the West, you are duty bound to give them everything they demand, and if not, you're going to be considered a saboteur. So he's here says, right, what is actually going on is an attempt to legally ban any dissent, take away Elon Musk's right to be a military contractor, haul him before a congressional committee, require Twitter to ban what they're calling pro-Russia propaganda, which is really nothing other than people questioning or opposing their war policy for their government, which is absolutely the right of every American citizen or the citizen of every country to do. And then bring up David Frum here, who I've met a few times, who also is clearly a propagandist, right? An American citizen and U.S. government contractor acknowledges that he personally sabotaged. That's what he's going with. That's the frame David Frum is going with here, right? He personally sabotaged a military opposition of a U.S. ally. Musk thwarted what might have been a decisive military operation to shorten the Russian war against Ukraine, save who knows how many lives, and put an end to Russian food blockade of poor countries in Africa and Asia, all while a U.S. government contractor. So, whoa, sounds pretty bad, according to David Frum, right? Whoa. But now we know, of course, that the way he's being treated, the way he's being singled out, I think falls exactly in line with what Glenn Greenwald is saying. Now, here's also Semaphore, right? The Semaphore article that I just mentioned, Mehdi Hassan, of course, getting into it, right? Are we going to do a Twitter files on that, right? Are we going to do a Twitter files on that one? So you can see the coordination here. Now, Elon's going to get a bunch of bad press today, right? That because Putin has praised him, right? So Putin praised Elon Musk today as well, called him a talented and outstanding person. That's not going to sit well, right? What do you think that's going to turn into? So here's where this liminal space and the space laser thing come into place, right? So things are changing as much as they were last time we were dealing with the Henry Ford situation 100 and something years ago, right? And we clearly have a major industrialist promoting new forms of communication, new forms of commercial engagement, commercial relationships. He wants a lot of stuff to go on X, right? He's starting a crypto exchange inside of it. He's getting money transmitter licenses, all these kinds of things. So as this platform grows and becomes more relevant, remember, he has one major advantage major advantage. And I think it will underline this liminal space argument better than we ever have. And it comes directly related to this conversation about the use of the satellites. And it's the following, and it's my prediction for the day. I think Elon Musk is going to come up with a phone or interface, some form of physical device that will interact with his space internet, right? Because he's not bound by terrestrial internet. He's not, right? There is no need to put up towers. There's no need for AT&T to continue to exist in the United States. There's no need for T-Mobile to continue to exist in the United States. There's no reason for Bell to continue to exist in Canada. There's no reason for Orange to continue to exist in Europe. There's no reason for any of these companies to exist anymore, because he has put so many satellites in space that Starlink can really start to be used for other purposes. Now, I bring up the following guy. His name is Chun Satofishy, right? At Satofishy. He's got a lot of followers. He's a Bitcoiner. And he had to run away. I think he was a miner. So he's run away from China years ago. And now what he does is one of the most amazing things. In the summer of 2022, he took a boat to the South Pole and put in a Starlink satellite internet and then just left it there. So you have free internet at the South Pole. He did the North Pole this summer. So he boated all the way to the North Pole on a boat and installed a Starlink satellite. So anyone who arrives at the North Pole or the South Pole will get this guy's free internet, right? And he had a whole big comment yesterday on, and he's had this sort of over the summer on why it was so important for him personally to leave China, because he said he was getting targeted. Now, he didn't compare himself to Musk. I'm comparing him to Musk. So this is what he says. China has already gone bankrupt from the extreme lockdown. The government, being short of money, will try every means to snatch it from the society. It's not ruled by law. At a time like this, if you have money, if you don't run away quickly, aren't you waiting to be robbed? And he was talking here about a multi-chain CEO. So I guess there's something called multi-chain. And he's been kidnapped by their government, by the Chinese government, right? I guess he didn't get out in time. Now, I remember I was with a lot of these Chinese folks in 2020 when they got out of China the first time with the Wuhan thing, right? And they were already appearing like, they seemed like refugees in the sense that they couldn't go home. They were all stuck in America or whatever, and happy to be stuck there and not China. But this is before there were even lockdowns in America. So I guess this multi-chain CEO was kidnapped, right? And he wrote the whole thing, and he says, multi-chain CEO didn't listen to Steakfish CEO, hence learned a lesson. May God save his organs. Run. And he goes through the whole process of how he was kidnapped, right? May 21st, this guy, and then days later, and then people came, and then he was gone, and then no one's seen him even close to that since then, right? So this idea that Elon is getting targeted by these guys, and that the actual way in which their networks still can be bottlenecked are the service providers, the device manufacturers, all of these things, right? And so the going back right away, all the way back to Henry Ford and Edward Bernays, the idea even of an app on your phone, the way the apps even work, that's just an extension of consumer culture. That was an extension of the cell phones understanding what their business was, which was to have an online store for apps that other people could develop and then sell through the iPhone store. That model is not going to hunt any longer, right? It's finished, especially if Elon creates his own phone with one signal and AI is involved in it. Walter Isaacson, in the interview that he had with Lex Friedman yesterday, very clear that we don't even see Elon's biggest business yet. Like, it's not even obvious to us, right? The rockets are big, the satellites are big, X is big, the cars are big, the drilling is big. And I've said for a long time that the only technology we need on Earth to make it a utopia for Bitcoin and for everyone is like holes. If we just dig a lot of holes, we'll have a utopia. Did you know that? If we dig a bunch of holes, you can start making Stirling engines. The Stirling engines. So Stirling engines have been around for 200 years. It's just the difference in temperature, right? If you dig a hole, and the way our world works, the hot energy comes up and the temperature change creates enough momentum that it's basically a perpetual motion machine. I mean, it just will always work. You can do it with even skyscrapers. That's a future application of skyscrapers, where if you seal off the whole tunnel of the whole building top to bottom, but leave a hole in the top and then open a hole in the bottom, you'll create a current of wind just in a regular New York City skyscraper, that you can turn into a Stirling engine, and it will always work. It doesn't need wind, it doesn't need any of that stuff, right? So so the idea being that consumer culture, the app world, all of that stuff, that economy is done. The things that Elon is working on getting bigger, but we still don't even see the biggest thing. It's the robots and the AI out in the wild, and they're saying his forecasts for robot building inside of X is something like 10 billion units. He's not sold 10 billion cars, right? But 10 billion robots seems legit to me. Everyone's going to want one. Everyone's going to want 2 or 3. There's a lot of jobs we're not going to be able to do. But it's not just the AI and it's not just the robots. I think the main thing really will be winning space, right? Space is clearly emerging now as the important battlefield of World War III, because if we really are dealing with messaging and broadcast systems and getting away from terrestrial signaling, and we can create this new dialogue between space and planet Earth that moves everything we need on planet Earth. And as I've often described, the economy itself is, and that the world is surrounded by, I guess you can say, a psychological envelope, right? I've described the economy many times as a psychological engine, the world being surrounded by a type of psychological envelope. Well, how we communicate messages and between each other and all that stuff is really important. And so if you start taking away these centralized bottlenecks, if you start taking away broadcast towers, newspapers, basically the entire way we've built things, and start having the signal from space, start having AI instead of apps, and really rug pull the entire consumer model, a whole different world awaits. And we can see it. It's right there. It's right in front of our eyes. And the only way it won't happen is if this type of persecution against Musk works, or if any one of the other arguments they have to put people back in a cage work. But what are the other arguments they're coming up with, right? On the one hand, you've got this guy Chun, right, who's saying exactly what we're saying: get out of China, right? You're seeing a lot of Americans say, it's here too. And now with their whole, economies sort of mimicking each other, right? It's not just that, and this is from Ashley St. Clair again. It isn't just that. Americans are. It isn't just that Americans aren't. It isn't just that Americans are different in this situation than what's going on in China. It has more to do with the Chinese inability, equally unable to continue to manipulate their population, and things are changing over there just like they are here. And you can see it in demographics. You can see it in the way things are changing really quickly in China. And Professor St. Onge, who will be a speaker at Bitcoin Amsterdam, is talking about that here, as well as Wall Street Silver, as well as Ashley St. Clair, who had a lot to say about this stuff. So Professor St. Onge says China becoming uninvestable, as Bloomberg now says China may never catch up to America, because handing trillions to politically favored cronies while strangling the rest doesn't work any better in China than it does here. If China doesn't change, it could be looking at decades of slow growth with a plunging population, which would mean China has already passed its peak of power. Washington will take a victory lap, even as it follows Beijing down the exact same hole. And that's what Wall Street Silver says here. He says demographics is destiny for China. China may have already peaked because China's population pyramid is a mess due to their former one-child policy and the desire for male children. China's population is, in fact, already declining. Its population will likely decline faster and faster in the decades to come, even if the People's Republic of China government has other wishes, because China's citizens are already choosing to have far fewer babies. and had been expected when the earlier one-child policy was gradually relaxed, then lifted, as in the last couple of decades. Let me get the Ashley St. Clair note here, because it was really good. She's going after the money from from Twitter, so she's posting all kinds of stuff that she wouldn't have before. Yeah, here's where it is. So she's talking here about debt and what's going on in that instance of China and the US being bound almost by the same forces and headed for the same failure. So she says, so if China and Japan are no longer buying our US debts as much as they used to, then who is buying them now? At some point, the Fed printer is the buyer of last resort. What happens to inflation? Are we going to have additional food inflation of 20% or even more housing inflation? Will wages keep going up? My guess is probably not. So you've got these two competing systems, clearly, right? They've got they require Janet Yellen and Powell, right? Yellen and Powell have to get the rest of the world, someone to buy these things. They've got to get everyone to believe that Joe Biden is coherent. They've got to get everyone to believe the Ukraine war is the right way to go. They got to get everyone to believe that energy policies have to be in line with what Greta wants, right? Because her happiness is the important thing. And how are they going to get there, right? How are they going to do this, right? It is a competing system. You've got Elon Musk on one end, and you've got, and then you've even got here's another instance of what's going on and how much things are going to change and how hard it is going to be for anyone to go backwards, right? You've got Vivek, who's also going to be starting his own podcast now. Vivek starting a podcast, right? So Semaphore Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is getting further into the media business with his own podcast. I think that's going to work. You think Vivek's podcast is going to get some listens? I don't think we even know what podcast audiences are like yet, now that we're starting to see this thing catch on really, really well. So you've got Vivek doing that, right? You've already got, here's the, people talking about the capacity for America to even get out of these troubles, and the capacity for persuasion and the capacity to indeed say what I just said, right? Get everyone to believe Biden is going strong, everyone to believe that Yellen can do her job, and everyone to believe that it's all just going to be fine, right? Wall Street Silver underlining, first of all, that the old George Carlin line, right? It's a big club and you ain't in it. And he's asked the question straight up, right? Does anyone really think he didn't write this. Does anyone really think that is what is going on? Okay. The US Treasury and the Federal Reserve are supposed to be independent of each other, right? And then he says, but does anyone really believe that? The Fed is a controlled institution that does the bidding of the large banks and the powers in DC. And he says in another tweet that this is what we've got to show for it, right? The Great Depression is now, right? And he's underlining here, and I've said this many times, right? What if a Great Depression comes to America? What about all those pictures we used to see in the Great Depression? Well, I hate to break it to you, it's been that way for a while, right? We haven't been looking great on our streets, and we have more than enough images already to create albums like we saw when we grew up about how bad the Depression was. And he puts the numbers into context here, and he says the Great Depression is now. During the Great Depression, houses were 3 times the average salary. Today, it's 8. Cars were 46% of the yearly salary. So this is when Henry Ford was still had his fingerprint on the industry. Ford had still not gone to planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence was only coming in from General Motors at that time in the 30s. That's when it really started to take off. Today, it's 85%. So they were 46. Cars were 46% of the yearly salary. Today, it's 85%. Rent only took 16% of your annual salary before. Today, it's 42%. Some ask whether we are already in an unrecognized silent recession or worse, that is being hidden by massage data from the government, right? And I think most people can see that, right? It's not like any of those other articles that are at the start, right? Americans are richer than ever. We have $33 trillion in debt, but it's okay. Not all debt's bad, right? Not all debt's bad. So, you've got Joe Biden, who yesterday was saying, oh, I was in 9/11 the day after 9/11. Not true, right? He was in the Senate. None of these things were true. No one is even asking questions about his mental faculties. But it looks like what they're going to go with, right? The plan, I can't see what other plan there is. It's attack ads, it's lawfare, and I think they're going to keep trying to use their hypnotic powers and their manipulation powers. But how good are they, right? Are we dealing with earth-bound forces versus Bitcoin and other systems that are already, we've already reached exit velocity as far as I can tell with Bitcoin, right? You had David Marcus yesterday on CNBC talking about Bitcoin being a global internet, a global protocol for internet money, right? You've got Elon Musk with 80% of the tonnage in space. And the way I think of it already is that the terrestrial forces, the gravitational pull of the fiat world simply can't reach space anymore. It's gone. I said it the minute David Marcus came out with his first invention. When David Marcus, who was there yesterday talking about Lightning, talking about Bitcoin on CNBC, when he was at Facebook and he came up with Libra, I went, oh shit, okay. And I went right to DC because all shit broke loose, right? I knew we were not in trouble, but something was up. And the reason I said that is because with Facebook coming out with its stablecoin, they were basically showing the whole field. They were showing the whole story of Bitcoin, accidentally showing the whole story of Bitcoin to the world. And I said, yikes, I don't know if we're ready for this because this is going to bring the heat, right? That's what I said in the summer of 2019. This is going to bring the heat. And it ended up being a great occasion for Bitcoin because Bitcoin stood in contrast to shit coins. That's where the shitcoin word became popularized and was injected into mainstream media. It was Meltem Demirors who did that. I was on the train with her. I was chatting with her the whole time. It was hilarious. We ran our own event on the side of the testimonies that were going on that day. So we got all the people that were testifying just across the street from the Capitol buildings. And it was a great little event. It was an excellent an excellent touch point, and Bitcoin came out stronger than ever. But I remember that showing the world the field with the Facebook stablecoin was not risky, but it was we were no longer able to hide what it was that we were doing as Bitcoiners. It was now front and center. And I figured if we survived that, we had actually reached exit velocity and we're in space, and that the forces of Earth simply didn't have an effect on us anymore. Luckily, that's how it went. That's what I could tell, right? That's how far it went. So all that in mind, here's where I think their big plans are, right? It's things like this. This is from MSNBC. They've carted out one of the most feeble-minded intellectuals the left has ever seen. This is like David Frum levels of low IQ. They brought out Naomi Klein, who is a Canadian low IQ, low influence, really just targeting midwits, right? So she came out with a book when I was a college student called Hardcore Logo or something like that. It was the dumbest book you've ever read in your life. It's all anti capitalism, Marxism is so great, blah, 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 blah. So she's written a new book. She hasn't written a book in years, right? She hasn't written a book in years, and she's trotting out now. And this Canadian low IQ person comes out with a new book, and MSNBC, of course, covering it, right? And they say her new book hints at a roadmap for Biden's reelection. The instability of the pandemic is still very much with us, right? So she goes on in this article. Let me just tell you the kind of stuff she's writing about. So first of all, she makes an issue of Naomi Wolf, right, as her doppelganger. Naomi Wolf was the woman from the Clinton administration who's a big anti-vaxxer now. So the whole point of the book is like, I'm not her. According to I will never read the book, by the way. I will only read the reviews or whatever this is. So here's what she actually says. This is what she's going with, right? It's back to this economy thing, right? And her actual idea, her actual belief Let me see where her thing is here. Yeah. So, which brings us to the second term. Oh no, where is it? Partnership. Where is it? Where is it? It's a part where she says this is the plan for him to win, and it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard. All right. Well, whatever. Let me just find the one that's important. Oh yeah. So this is the part where a full platform is beyond the scope. But here's where he should start. One easy starting point that builds on work already done in Biden's first term would be to call out big business, not just big tech and big pharma, but all companies, whether through corporate consolidation, share buybacks, or worker exploitation. They've hurt American pocketbooks and made their lives more precarious. The president can also expand upon the environmental efforts of his first term. So he can go and do all these things, right? You need policy solutions that tell people actually it's called the social safety net for a reason. And she wants so he's going to win. Like it's all these things. This is how they get it back. This is the plan, right? This is the roadmap. This is the plan. It's restabilizing America on the return to normalcy. An end to an end to the aberrant Trump presidency. And this is where it gets really good. On the one hand, unlike his predecessor, Biden follows the law. But Americans still feel overwhelmed in the post-pandemic malaise. People need very robust policy solutions to these crises, Klein said. And if they're not seeing them manifest, then they will be more attracted to the kind of counterfeit anti-elitism, which is what the Bannons of the world are selling, right? So who's going to win here? Is it Naomi Klein's plan of robust policy and base it on Biden following the law? Is that going to cut it, right? Or are we going to get space lasers and AI phones that take away our cell phone bill? Which one do you think is going to win, right? Is it going to be Elizabeth Warren and her hauling companies that Naomi Klein tells her to haul in front of Congress? Is that going to do it? Maybe. I mean, I could be wrong, right? But what I see is a battle for hearts and minds. And what I see is a feeble, weakened fiat condition that is existing entirely in a liminal space. It's an empty mall, right? It's an empty mall. It's an empty mall versus space lasers. So you tell me which side you want to be on, the space laser side, right? Or the empty mall. And within all of this, of course, we can see how Bitcoin plays. We can see that the nation state argument of America and China, it's the same thing, right? They're the same thing at this point, right? The Chinese government, way worse, CCP, way worse, but the Americans not far behind. And there's no reason to celebrate the differences, especially when you see stuff like Elon Musk. Is he any different than that Steakfish CEO who's putting up satellites on the North Pole and the South Pole? To me, the future is the guy who is just out there living his best life on his Bitcoin. His advice to every one of you is there's no way Bitcoin can't work. Just hodl your coins, do whatever job you need to. And in the end, this whole thing is going to melt away and the world is going to calibrate to a Bitcoin standard in a Bitcoin era. And it will change everything. It will change consumption. It will change the psychological space that we have surrounded the world with. Now, remember, it's even like this idea, right? Have you ever met someone who was aware of what's going on with Trump and hated him? What I mean is, and I mean hated him, right? What I mean is, anyone who is anti-Trump, right? You ask them why. They're going to come up with one of the hoaxes. It's always one of the hoaxes. It's Charlottesville. It's the drinking bleach. It's the this and the that, right? It's always one of the hoaxes. January 6th. But the minute one of these lies is dispelled, the reasons are gone. And anyone who has enough reasons understands usually that Trump is, you might not like him. I always give, you've always got to give a bit of space. right? For the people who can't stand bullies when it comes to Trump. I get it, because that goes back to childhood psychology. It might not actually be changeable, right? So I always give people that space. If they don't like a bully and I sense that, I'm not even going to try, right? But if it isn't that, if it's someone who you can tell is just either, oh, my NPC, my NPC flow chart, right, starts with Bitcoin will get you to identify a NPC very easily. Just say something Bitcoin, and the way I categorize it is if they don't have a Bitcoin origin story, automatic NPC. Like if they don't have a story when they first contacted Bitcoin, automatic. Now, if they do have a story about when they first contacted Bitcoin, it comes into about 4 different types of answers, right? And each of them signify the type of NPC you are. So Bitcoin allows you to identify and then specify which kind of NPC you're dealing with. And once you have that NPC specified, you can actually start manipulating them into different ways that'll make your quality of life better, right? You don't really have to deal with them after that. Once you know what you're dealing with, which kind, there's a few different traps and different mental redirects that you can use in order to go on with your life and not get dragged down by any of these losers. So it's an important thing, right? Oops, I still got the Montreal weather. Let me just get that out of there. How many in chat have a Coinbase account? Yeah. So the tension then is that they've got to get this thing sewed up, and you got this guy in China who's giving you good advice, and I think that advice is going to sort of take over all around the world, and I can't imagine them being successful with the tools they've got, and it's just a matter of time. Now, let me see where we're at here with some of these comments. Hold on. Oh, we got someone chatting with the Coinbase. Napoleon Hill telling. Hold on. They got Ye after all. No one beats them. We miss Ye, don't we? Yeah, Huru. We wish he was around. Would have been very interesting had he stuck in this 2020 race. I'm missing from my coin. But anybody else have this happen? Any suggestions on how to recover? I don't know. Veterans cannabis. I don't know. Coinbase is a pretty, like, from what I gather, you shouldn't. I've never had any crazy stories about Coinbase being rough. He had a row of buttons on his desk, though he could get any answer he wanted. Yeah. It's not. Yeah, this is the things they're actually saying. It's just so great. It's just so great. Ice is no joke. You ever saw Mosquito Coast? Ice is civilization. Yeah. Well, I love ice. I will always love ice. Always. Maximum ice all the time. Give the man a like. We love likes. We love likes. His early years ran on methanol and ethanol that could be made on the farm. Yeah, his early cars. So there you go. Yeah, it was Rockefeller that drove the change to petroleum, which was a waste product from the refinery business. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big Henry Ford fan. Didn't he say that if Americans knew how the banking system worked, he would be the next morning? Something to that effect. He sure did. Yeah, he sure did. I think when ADL compares Musk to Ford, it's not. No. Ford was a notorious anti-Semite. Yeah, he was a big promoter. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Would be called a conspiracy theorist. Yes. Now, I mean, he was easily dupable as well, right? He was easy to influence. Chatting with checking in my wallet. Sorry, buddy. I don't want to. I think you'll be fine, though. Honestly, I think you'll be fine. Veterans cannabis. I know my wife used Coinbase a while ago, and they did great customer service for her. We need alternative to non-capture devices. We sure do. Tom's talking about the cell phones here. All these Ukrainian floggers and pro-war people should their money where their mouth is. Take a plane, pick up a gun. Yeah, I've always been for that, P-Man Van. Yeah, I don't have any problem with anyone who wants to go out there and fight that. Any one of them, go for it. I'm the same with the MAID in Canada. Sorry. I don't know any Bitcoiners signing up for MAID. or conservatives or anyone who wants it. You go get it. You go. If it was people that I loved and knew, I would be very worried, but I'm not. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Just came back from the gym, canalizing Moscow time to generate positivity in my surroundings. It's a good idea. Johnny Rico, what's up, my man? I see Bitcoin as the leading edge of the new sphere, Earth's psychological envelope. I've got a couple months of work in articulating this. I look forward to sharing. Hey, that's precisely why this show is called The Breakup. It's exactly what we're going through. The new sphere is itself in a liminal space now, but the polarity will change once more nodes are running in space, for lack of a better word. Once more Bitcoin transactions are going directly to space and back. I think we're going to be there. Silent depression meme is powerful. It sure is. Yeah. Thankfully, at a warmer latitude, ice is actually money here. Money is the barometer of society's virtue. When you see that trading is done not by consent, but by compulsion, when you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing. Yeah. When you see the money is flowing to those who deal not in goods, but in favors, when you see that men get rich by graft and pull by work, and your laws don't protect you. Yeah, that's exactly what this Chinese guy was saying. That's what I liked about it. Like, at this point, anyone who sticks around in China, it's your problem. Now, I have empathy for everyone in China. It's hard, rich, money, blah, blah, hard to get out. It's a shithole. Against them, protect them against you. When you see corruption being rewarded and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. Yeah, but I don't think America's doomed. I think we're going to be better than ever. Ayn Rand warned them. Luckily, we have not damned our lifeblood. Bitcoin fixes this. Yeah. Hope everyone is having a fantastic morning. I think we are. I think we're having a great morning. I like Bobby's tell the truth path better. Yeah, me too. Yeah, the telling the truth path is going to work. I think I get it. Daniel's comparing it to Naomi Klein's robust policy is gonna, because everyone is waiting for robust policy. I can't wait. All these know-it-alls, they're going to be debating the robust policy. Yeah, Sleepy Joe. That's why I've been saying forever, Daniel. As much as I love Donald Trump, right? As much as I love him, I had already resigned myself in the summer of 2020 that he was going to lose, and that Joe was actually perfect. He's perfect. As a Bitcoiner, he's perfect. I can't deny the reasons I wanted Trump in 2016 are the same I wanted Biden in 2020, right? It changed reality, and that's what we were after here. We're after reality changing people. And so I think we're there. Who mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, but I don't remember what it was in reference to. I listened to like 4 hours of Balaji yesterday about a synopsis around the backdrop of our current context, and there's some good stuff in there, but really I just keep hearing orange versus green. Yeah, Balaji is a repeat himself kind of guy, which is important, right? That's how good persuasion works. So I think it works. Balaji's rips are pure. They are. Yeah. I've always been a big, Huru says Jeffrey Epstein as in related to Trump. Yeah, but I still don't see the Trump Epstein connection too much. Looks like Trump kicked him out of the hotel. Like the one story that sticks out to me, pure seeing what I want to see, is that one of the girls at Trump at Mar-a-Lago was assaulted. Like a young staffer was assaulted by Epstein, and Trump banned Epstein for life. So, but I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't see Trump as being within the Epstein world, but I could be wrong. Looking at Stormy Daniels, it doesn't look like the Epstein girls are his flavor. So Balaji's talking about the Gray Party idea. Yeah, I think he rebrands. Yeah, I think RFK runs as an independent. I think he's going to give one of the big FUs of all time to the Dems. And I think I think, I really believe this. I could be wrong, but I think a third party can actually take it this time because it only takes 40%. 35, you can win it, right? Now, Trump's 40% or whatever seems unmovable. So the Dems would have to be lower than 20, which is possible. And anyway, again, the if RFK can turn it into him against Trump for whoever has the right to destroy the deep state, whoever has the moral right, I think you would even get, if they don't fight each other, which I don't think they will, right? I think they're going to be very civil. I think there's mutual respect between the two of them. I think RFK can actually make the case that it's his right to destroy the deep state. That's where I think if he goes third party, the only debate you're going to see between Trump and him is Trump saying, well, they tried to assassinate me, and RFK saying, well, they assassinated my whole family. So it's up to the American people to decide. Because again, but it might change, because I don't, honestly, guys, I don't know if Trump makes it. I'm a little worried in that, the UFO thing. If you look at the world the way I have come to look at the world in my experience and what I've done, the UFO thing only makes sense to me anyway. I can't think of another reason, right? Scaring other countries about what we've got, maybe. I mean, that's plausible, right? Like trying to put some mystery into the arms that America has, so that maybe China or Russia think twice. But it's like 1%. To me, it is a test of the emergency brainwash system and the liminal space that we're in. And it really is to look and see if the trick works. Because if the trick works, you can actually see that the population is primed for a bigger one, which is Trump, right? So how do they set Trump up? How do they know they can get away with it? I think you do the UFO thing and you gauge how much of the population, and then you can tell, can we go or not? That's how I see it. So I think the number came in pretty good, honestly. 50% probably are stupid enough. So, because you don't need that. I mean, how many people believed that Kennedy was assassinated by the CIA from the 60s on? It was 20-something%, right? It had to have been that high. But that's what you're saying. If you're one of these persuaders, you're saying, well, I can live with my fault tolerance is 20-something%. My fault tolerance is probably 30%, right? The fault tolerance of the persuaders, they say, well, if 30% think it's great, we killed them, we can get away with that. Like, that's fine, right? So, now, yeah, like he is going to be forced. So RFK is going to be forced to run as an independent. Absolutely. China's fine. The problem with China is if you've got money, like these Bitcoiners. Yeah, I mean, you can go around China, way less trouble than in America, way less of a police state, believe it or not. China, is RFK 2023. Warp speed was a problem. Yeah. And his last day in office was a problem for Trump. And I've said it before. I want Trump to be just celebrated as like an elder statesman who did his best, and did a great job. He made mistakes like anyone, and I forgive him. And I would be totally down with a Trump too. But I think, like I said, if we have to choose who gets the actual knife to kill the deep state, Trump's got a real, he's got a real case to be made. I just think that everything RFK's been through makes him, I think, the right guy to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to do it, right? He's going to do it. And RFK will run as a Kennedy Democrat. That's why he's going to destroy the Dems. That's why Rob Reiner had to come out and say it yesterday, right? Don't do it, right? Third party candidate can't be around so that we can have democracy. But that's the shit that has to work for them to keep this going, right? So The anxiety we're feeling really is this liminal space thing. Technology is falling, the money is falling, the systems are falling. We're entering a new era, and space lasers and space communications and satellites and of course Bitcoin are going to be what this thing is set on. And I think we're getting there. This year is big. All right, team, that's all I got. I hope you're having a great day. I believe at some point they will need Bitcoiners, not just for their money, but all their abilities we're busy mastering, some of which will prove essential, like security and privacy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. The security and privacy thing, I think goes away in a sense that if you don't have banks expected to deputize and act like law enforcement, and you don't have all these executive branch know-it-alls running around, I don't know if you need to I don't need if you need weapons grade privacy anymore if there isn't an army of people trying to break through and computers calibrated to cash in on you. But the idea of it, yeah, I think the abilities that Bitcoiners are mastering that are more important are the time preference thing, treating everyone as an individual, seeing that it's a peer network and that other users are peers, and that you should not think of them as like anonymous meat bags. And the health stuff, which goes along with the time preference, and then wrap the health and the time preference up, and you have an answer to the hole in American's heart that was caused by consumption, the spiritual void. And I think that's Bitcoin's bigger role. The privacy stuff, I get why people are so in tune on it, but I just know personally, and I've seen around me, that we trade our privacy very easily for stuff. And you got to remember what Satoshi did. That was the best thing Satoshi did, was he took us for who we are, right? Greed and those things. So Bitcoin to me is much more effective at rechanneling greed than it is about, like, to me, I hear Naomi Klein's robust policy stuff when I hear privacy, right? That's just what I hear. I just don't think it changes society. I think we'll get more privacy because we'll change the systems that are taking away our privacy. But I'm not like, oh, Bitcoin needs to scale privacy things like Monero. I don't believe that, right? Yeah, Bitcoin itself will take care of the security. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. What I mean is, I don't think we need like engineers to trick Bitcoin out so that it's more private and secure. I think we just have to keep admitting the truth that what are those fucking people? The chainalysis, this graph analysis shit was always dumb and it never worked. I knew it from the start because I was one of the original graph analysts looking into what it was. And I was like, this is really what you have, right? This is the whole kit and caboodle. And I was asking these questions as a newbie to the technical space back in 2015, and I still don't buy it. And it's coming out to be sort of true, right? What people are saying is that graph analysis is sucky. And there you go. HBDC. Oh yeah, there you go. Yes. Oh yeah, well, that's already the case, right? Like RFK already has really good Bitcoin advisors, Vivek too. And Trump, I hear there's talks with like BJ Dichter. You guys know who he is. He was one of the Bitcoiners related to the Canada truckers protest, right? I've heard he's been briefing Trump a little on Bitcoin. So Trump's going to get there. He's going to get there. What kind of watch are you wearing? Just an Apple Watch, man. I'm not a watch guy. I like I like the Apple Watch for a few things. I've become super aware of lunar orbits and lunar cycles. So when full moons are, new moons, all that stuff. The sun's rise and set, I basically never miss it because that's also on my phone. So when I use the watch, I use it to tell time, but more things than just the time. So the moon, the sun. Of course, I keep a weather thing on it. I always keep the UV on it as well because I'm down by the equator a lot. I know it gets to like the crazy 12, 13. Now, of course, I do not eat seed oils and do not wear sunscreen. I never get a sunburn down there, nor do my children, nor does anyone. But I also stay out of the sun at the peak noon time anyway. So there you go. Trump isn't. Yeah, I've always said the orange man has to get into the orange coin, and it is a simulation wink. I've believed that for a long time. All right, team. That's all I got. Peace. See you tomorrow. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great Tuesday.